All right, we're going to talk Freud. Freud came up with one of the first, if not the first, was the first psychological theory of personality development. He focused highly on personality being formed in the way that we get our needs met through the pathways to getting our needs met. And he said that's a way that we build our personality. So the first half of his theory deals with what's called psychosexual development, that we develop through different stages of getting our needs met. Now, psychosexual sounds, we know how it sounds, but he's talking about psychological forces that are brought to bear to bring pleasure. Not just sexual pleasure, but all pleasure. How do we get our needs met? Gratification is an important word here, and fixation is an important word. So I might jot those down. How do I gratify my needs as an infant? The first way I gratify my needs is I put things in my mouth. I explore the world. I get fed, and I soothe myself through oral gratification. So the first stage, from 0 to about 1.5, he said children are going to get most of their needs met through their oral cavity. And he said if we allow that to happen, if that goes well, then we learn how to do that, and we move on to find other ways to get our needs met. If something goes wrong, he gave examples of being weaned too early, of having an injury, or being deprived, then we become fixated on meeting our needs, oral gratification. So a person who bites their fingernails, a person who chews on everything they find, a person who talks a lot, that's oral gratification. I'm meeting my needs by sharing ideas and sharing information. All of that is oral gratification. And he said oral fixation means that I become a very needy and dependent person. So he was looking at personality characteristics, and when he ran across a needy and dependent person, he said, well, that person's very infantile in their fixation. They're fixated on oral gratification. Smoking would be another example of oral gratification, and perhaps in his perception came from early needs going unmet. Next stage, anal. Tough stage to talk about, but I want you to think in generalized terms, not specific terms. Around the age of 2.5, parents change the rules on their child pretty dramatically. All this time I've been allowing you to do whatever you want. You can go to the bathroom wherever you want, you can put things in your mouth, whatever. Haven't been very restrictive or controlling of an infant's behavior up until about 1.5 or 2, and then we change the rules. And one of the most dramatic ways we change the rules is we say no longer are you allowed to just go to the bathroom anytime you want. When you go to the bathroom, you need to come here and sit on this very scary open space over water, and eliminate that way. So he said he used that as a picture of parents exerting more control over their children, and the control battle that can create. One of the very first control battles that happens between a parent and their child is the battle over when and where do I go potty. When I finally learn to follow my parents' rules and bring myself under their control, allow them to bring my will kind of a little bit better under their control, then that gratifies me. My needs are gratified. I can get what I want by learning to ask with the word please. I can get what I want by learning to follow their rules. And so no longer do I just need to chew on things or suck on a binky to gratify my needs. Now I need to follow rules. He said that if everything goes all right, then now I can gratify needs orally. I can gratify needs by following rules in society and expectations. If not, then I either feel like control is constantly being taken from me and I need to take all that I can, or I feel that I'm, that I'm out of control, or that I need to cling to control. So when he found somebody who was stingy and selfish, he would say something went wrong in their early rule following, and they feel like they need to hyper control things. If we're talking about Freud, think just for a moment what happened 2 months ago. What did people hoard? Isn't it fascinating that people, when they were out of control, they went to hoarding something that was incredibly Freudian? Toilet paper, of all things. If I'm out of control, I need to find something that I can control. Well, by golly, I can control how much toilet paper I have in the house. Freud would have just found that incredibly fascinating and affirming of his theory. Next stage is the phallic stage. A phallic symbol is anything that is shaped like a penis. So when we think of the phallic stage, we are certainly thinking about the beginning of a child's sexual awakening, not in receiving sexual gratification from others. Children are relatively asexual until until puberty really hits, unless they're exposed to information that they should not be exposed to. That's hypersexualization of a child, very sad and difficult for them and damaging. But what Freud was basically saying was around the age of 3 to 5 to 6, children discover that there are certain places on their body that feel really good, and that becomes a way to gratify some of their needs. So they touch those places. And again, this is just an example of a little part of the whole here. How do I manipulate myself and others to bring about some form of gratification or pleasure? He said that, as an example, we would say, little boys and little girls touch themselves. They expose their genitals. They have their hand down their pants, and they're touching down there as a way to describe it, to explain that. He said, well, that feels good. If it felt really good to you to tug on your earlobe, which is socially acceptable, you would do that a lot. For some people, it's playing with their hair. For some people, it's twiddling their thumbs. For children, they just don't know any better until they're taught that you can't go around pulling your dress up over your head or walking around with your hand down your pants. He said parents' response to this is important because it sets the tone for children's understanding of their sexual identity, or their sexual selves. Their sexual selves. The parent who freaks out about it and says, oh my gosh, what are you doing? That's horrible. Don't ever touch down there. It's dirty, nasty. Well, I'm telling my child one of two things. One, that I'm dirty, nasty, and I better have a lot of shame surrounding sexual arousal and desire in that part of my body. Or two, there's a part of my body that makes mommy and daddy freak out. I really need to investigate this and delve into it quite a bit deeper, so you can develop a phallic fixation and either experience exaggerated sexual response or shame in that area. It was also the time when the Oedipus and Electra complex developed. You can look into those. But it's the desire of a boy for all of his mom's attention, or the desire of a girl for all of her mom's attention. It helps go into determining later on who I marry and how I respond to them. For exhausted parents around 6 or 7, things go underground. So we go into the latency phase. Latent means hidden. And so everything that is underground is hidden, my desires, but generally children in the latency stage gratify needs by making friends, playing. Really, really important to let a 7-year-old be a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old be a 9-year-old. They need to play. They need to have some structure in their lives, but they don't need to be overly controlled. They don't need to be overly directed. What they want to do, they need to generally be able to do it. If it's play with Lego, if it's play with video games, play soccer, talent show kind of stuff, we need to let them be kids Let them have their fantasies during the latency stage, because that's the way they're gratifying their needs. It may totally be unrealistic that little Bobby wants to be an astronaut, and I'm tempted to say, well, Bobby, you're not very good at science, but let's build him a spaceship out of a cardboard box anyway, and let him dream. He's gratifying needs there. For children who go through divorce in later childhood, very often they'll grow up and to say, I didn't get a childhood, and so that's why I'm a 20-year-old or 25-year-old who's irresponsible and plays video games most of the time. If I had to grow up too soon, I become fixated at the latency stage, and that becomes a characteristic of my personality. I'm a 30-year-old man who behaves like a 9-year-old boy in his playfulness, not sometimes all the time. And finally, the genital stage, which he used to characterize mature sexuality, that we gratify our needs by being more mature in our interactions with other people so that we can form long-standing, lasting, meaningful relationships with friends, which of course would not involve sexuality, although in a sense it does. Males are drawn to certain other males and females because of their identity, because of how they feel about themselves and their gender, their sexuality, maleness, or femaleness for females. And of course, one of those relationships that I'm using to gratify my needs will become my sexual relationship, my marriage relationship. So that's Freud, the first part. We'll go to part 2 of Freud here in a second, but I'm going to stop and come back. But you want to see the picture. There's the picture.